Hey everybody, welcome to the Purpose People podcast. Today I'm privileged to have Anna Brees from Brees Media. So welcome to the sofa.
Really excited to be here. Thank you very much. Anna Brees.
Anna Brees. Anna Brees.
Welsh, it's Welsh. It comes from the Welsh name Brees, so it's Anna Brees.
Sorry. Do you want to do that again?
No, you're fine. Everyone says Brees Media, yeah.
So obviously you kind of spent a lot of time on social media and growing a bit of a following, and it grew over the whole pandemic and stuff. But let's just start back to from university or college or whatever. What was it that you wanted to do in life? What was was it always journalism was your main focus?
Not at all, no. I mean, I did my GCSEs and then I wanted to become a missionary, actually.
Okay.
I wasn't that interested in A-levels, so I didn't do particularly well in A-levels. I just lost interest. I ended up in a relationship with someone and I got a bit distracted. I wasn't doing so much schoolwork. And I was going to take a year out to do Birmingham City Mission, I think it was, and I wanted to be a missionary.
Okay. What country? Anywhere?
Anywhere. I mean, yeah. I've changed so much. Every decade I'm a different person because, looking back then, I really... I wouldn't, now I don't think you should go into a country and preach to them. The information should be there if they want to come to you. So I wouldn't be, it was a brief thing wanting to be a missionary. But I became a Christian and it became very important to me. I was always looking for the meaning in life, trying to understand why am I here?
Yeah.
Why am I here? What on earth is this all about? What is the purpose of this existence?
Yeah.
And so I ended up not really committing to doing my A-levels. I wanted to do psychology at Cardiff University. I didn't get the grades. And I ended up going to Lampeter University in West Wales and ended up studying theology. I thought I was studying theology and philosophy. And this is a funny story. But I got there. My mum just said, just do a term. Because my mum, it was back in the days when university was free. And I was in this relationship that she wanted me to get away from, a toxic relationship. She said, go to university, just do the first term. So I went reluctantly to Lampeter University and I put down theology and philosophy. But when I got there, it said on the bed, this welcome pack, you're studying theology and anthropology. And I thought, well, I don't know what anthropology is, but it doesn't matter because I'm not staying. So I'll just go to these lectures and do anthropology. Anyway, I ended up continuing with the anthropology and I stayed and loved it. Got away from that relationship and I was there for 3 years and I got a 2-1 in theology and anthropology.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And anthropology, we looked at missionary when I studied anthropology, and a lot of damage was done by missionaries actually going to societies which were completely untouched. They had their own religious system, their own values, symbols, culture. And then anthropologists would, if they did go in, it's called an ethnography. They go in and they just observe and they mustn't take anything with them, not even a paper and a pen. Because as soon as you go into a culture that's untouched, with a paper and a pen, for example, you're impacting it or affecting that culture in a way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Certainly, mobile phone or even the clothes you wear. So you have to wear the clothes they're wearing. You have to eat what they're eating. You have to observe their language, say very little. So you're just there as an observer, and that's called an ethnography. So you can see how that would contrast with, say, a missionary coming in. I know some missionaries in the past have come in and leafleted and brought the Bible and brought their interpretation of the meaning of life and what the soul and the spirit and the sun is, into that society and culture. So it was very interesting to see it from the anthropological perspective.
Yeah.
And then the theology alongside that. And then when I left, I ended up, my mum and dad were concerned there weren't a lot of jobs around at the time. I really wanted to go to London, take a few years out and just work in a bar. But they said, you can't go to London, it's too scary, Anna. So I ended up in Guernsey working for a bank, the Rothschild's bank, for a couple of years. And then finally, at the age of 23, I thought, what do you really want to do, Anna? I didn't like the bank. I was making rich people richer, doing something called gearing for Rothschild's bank. I'm very miserable. And at 23, do you have these moments in your life where you think, right, sort yourself out, that you're 23, you're not happy. What are you going to do here? What are you going to do about it? And I've just thought to myself, I would love a career in journalism because the variety, I get to meet people, learn things, get to meet different people all the time. A really exciting, interesting job. My uncle was a newspaper journalist at the time. He said, don't do it, Anna. Whatever you do, there's no money in it, it's hard work. I ended up in newspapers for a bit, and which I loved, and then ended up in television. So the only issue with me in terms of newspaper journalism was I'm just mildly dyslexic, so I'd struggled a little bit. So when it came to qualifying, so in the Channel Islands, you didn't need any qualifications to be a journalist.
Okay.
So I worked as a journalist for a while in the Channel Islands, and then I thought, right, I want to get back to the UK.
Yeah.
I don't want to live in Guernsey and Jersey anymore. So I ended up studying journalism, and I did broadcast journalism because I felt it suited me better in terms of speaking, so radio and TV, as opposed to what I'd had a go at, which was a newspaper journalism before that.
So what was the main difference between broadcast journalism? Was it literally, when you thought about that, was it more about being a roving reporter? Was it about being in front of the camera? Is that the difference between the two? What were you thinking there?
The passion was for, investigative journalism is so important, isn't it? And so powerful, holding people to account. So I was very interested in that, finding and uncovering stories other people hadn't, especially somewhere like the Channel Islands where there was a lot of cover-up. You looked at the Hope de la Garenne story. I don't know if you remember that, the children's home, it was a children's home in Jersey, and it was a massive story. About 2007, 2008, they thought initially that maybe bodies had been buried there of children, but it turned out that it wasn't. But terrible suffering took place. There was a lot of abuse of children at that home. A place where children went, where obviously they had no one looking after them, and people in positions of power got away with some terrible things.
Yeah.
And there's a very good documentary on the BBC, actually, called Secrets of a $1 Trillion Island. I don't know if it was on BBC iPlayer.
Okay.
I really recommend people go and watch that. But yeah, there's things that happen in the world that people try and cover up or keep quiet. So journalism, really good investigative journalism, is very powerful. And I was obviously very interested in that. However, when you're working for a weekly or a daily paper for a small patch, you don't do so much of that. You tend to rewrite press releases, and you don't. It's very different now.
So that was the thing. That was the heart behind it. You wanted to get into the deep down the stories and investigative journalism rather than
not back then. No. It was a very different world back then. We didn't have these mobiles, so. I was quite innocent and naive. I simply just wanted a bit of excitement and challenge and interest and adventure. But when stories came to me that I felt needed to be exposed in terms of corruption, abuse, injustice, then I was fired up to help, very much so. So when they came along, but that's not why I first went into journalism, really, no.
But so once that, did you notice that pattern then, that you were looking for that all the time, or was it just
it was just good fun. It was a lot of variety. I could be doing a top story when I was at ITV in Birmingham, and I was at ITV Birmingham, ITV Oxford, then I was at BBC South Today, and you do a top story where it could be I could be doing a live breaking news story. There's a plane crash. Or I could be doing an "and finally," just a light puff piece. So it was really interesting. Every day was different, working with the team. I really got on very well with the people behind the camera men and women and the editors. The people on screen were different. And that's definitely something I'm very happy to talk about, is I loved the feeling of being important. And when you're on the telly, and this was in the day where it was quite a big deal to be on the telly.
Do you
know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was when... So I'm from a little town called Newent. Do you know where Newent is? In the Forest of Dean, between Ross on Wye and Gloucester.
Yeah.
And it's not a very big town. Anyway, for example, when I was on the telly, people made a real fuss. I was asked to open the Onion Fair in Newent, and my mum, people used to make a real fuss. So how's Anna? I've seen her on the telly. This was back in 2006, 2007. And I used to get fan mail. And I thought, this just feels really nice. What am I getting out of this? This feels good. Yeah, it's like when you see your byline and you're a newspaper reporter, you see a photograph and your name.
Yeah.
What was I getting from that? I was getting something from that I think I really needed. After my media career, fast forwarding it for a bit, I ended up studying to be a counsellor therapist for a couple of years. And I really got to understand myself a little bit better and had therapy as well. And I looked back and realised that I was very badly bullied at school, and I think I had low self-worth, and I think I needed it. There was something I was getting from being on TV that was missing.
Yeah.
And I think maybe this could be quite common when it comes to professions like acting, TV presenting. Are you or you've being famous? You know, I feel famous. Why is that important to feel famous? What am I getting from that? What is it feeding? And it's interesting because in 2020 and 2021, I grew a very big following. You know, I was reaching millions and millions monthly. And I would be out and about and be recognised. I was in Marks and Spencer's with my kids. And this woman came up to me. I was just in the queue and spoke to this woman. And she said, "Oh my God, I know who you are. Thank you for what you're doing." In relation to the children and what will happen to kids during lockdown. Yeah. And I'd go to the local shop. And this woman started to shake when she saw me. And I thought, this is very strange. I rent out a chalet accommodation for my mum and dad. And it's bizarre. Half the people that I show around know me. They remember me. So I do now have a taste. It is a different taste. Before I was famous for being on the TV, on the normal terrestrial TV, on regional TV, ITV Central, ITV, BBC Saturday, for example. But this was a YouTube fame. This was a social media. This was Anna on Facebook. This was Anna more of a warrior, really, more of a fighter, of trying to provide another voice at that time. So I became famous then. And I'm now realised it's very strange because I don't know those people, but they really feel they know me. And it is an unusual feeling. And sometimes you think they want to be around you because of that famousness. And it's not real. And I do feel really sorry for very famous people. Really sorry. In fact, I've been doing a lot in Barry at the moment around the Gavin and Stacey Christmas special that's being filmed there. It's just, they've just finished. And James Corden, he can't go anywhere, you know? Yeah. Everyone's so friendly, but there's no privacy and everyone wants to be his friend. So I've seen a different side to being famous. Whereas I really wanted it, I definitely did, you know. And I remember all the girls that I used to work with, they were so desperate to be on screen. So they were always in the boss's office asking for more TV presenter shifts. Right. They weren't going to a dark pub in Birmingham after their shift, meeting a whistleblower, Yeah. They wanted to be on screen. And as soon as they'd finished their presenting shift, they'd come back and watch it back. And we all had something missing. And, you know, I'm sure there would be exceptions, but I really did feel all of the people that were on screen, we were hungry for something.
So what was the shift? So, I mean, you've gone quite across the thing, but what was the shift then? Because you said you were in journalism, you're being on the screen. At what point when you said I wanted to go into counselling and psychology and so, at what point where you realised that wasn't what you wanted?
Because I've kind of jumped across my career there in really describing the purpose of you know, I went into TV to be famous, and I've really examined that desire and looked into the heart of that and the vanity, the ego there, really. I've really seen that. And then so I've summarised that. So coming back to my career, so it was 2009 I had my son. So I was pregnant when I was at BBC Saturday. So I was working full-time as a presenter. I was very lucky to get that job because ITV Regional News had merged these massive patches. So when I was at Birmingham, there were 10 presenters, and they said, well, we're going to have to go down to 3. So we're going to make 7 of you redundant. Wow. And I was really lucky. I got a job as a presenter at the BBC. I got out. But it was only a 12-month contract, and I got pregnant. And I ended up moving back to Cardiff. And then my son kind of took over. He became the most important thing. And I was so lucky to have that. I didn't have a lot of money, but I was there with my little boy. And not until you have children do you realise how important they're going to be. So I thought, I'll give the baby to my mum and I'll go back to Southampton. I'll drive down there. And I'm sure lots of women would have done that. But as soon as he came along, there's no way. I couldn't be from him for a day. And I was very lucky to be able to be there for him. And then I went back briefly working for BBC X-Ray in Cardiff behind the scenes as an assistant producer. And I enjoyed that a lot. And they offered me a full-time job. But I was pregnant then with my second child. And again, I am so grateful for that time I had with them when they were little. I was there for them every day as a full-time mum. And I ended up just doing a part-time admin job for the National Union of Journalists while they were little. Yeah. So not earning a lot of money, but it was just a really quiet, peaceful, calm, happy time. There was no showiness. I wasn't on the telly,
Yeah.
I wasn't on social media. I was just a full-time mum with a nice little quiet admin job. And that was like that for years until that looked like that job could be coming to an end. And I'd been doing my counselling training then. And then we did a course called How to Shoot an Ad on an iPhone, and it was in the days of the iPhone 4. So it was 2011, 12.
Yeah.
And they were
actually
actually
round
teaching
back,
that.
didn't it? I think.
I've still got it.
The iPhone 4, I think.
Mine's got videos of when my son was born in 2012.
Wow.
So, yeah, we started teaching that through the National Union of Journalists, and I just saw how incredible this was going to be. I could see people's faces would light up. It was always sell out really quickly, this course, and we'd have communication professionals and people from PR come along. And the guy that taught it had a newspaper background, whereas I had a TV background.
Bro.
And I thought, wow, this is unbelievable. This is going to change the world. And I could see when people had learned this basic skill, it was like they'd learned to write or walk or ride a bicycle. So I created my own business and started teaching corporate clients all over the country, like Admiral, Wales and West Utilities, Public Health Wales, Transport for Scotland, Transport for Wales, councils in Somerset, journalists. I taught a lot of journalists. And I just was earning really good money. I had my own little business. I'd only have to work sort of 5-6 days a month, and I was earning really good money.
Yeah, of course.
On a presenter's shift or reporter's shift at ITV at the time, you were only getting like £175 a day, and I was earning way more than that.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was loving it, really good fun. And then lockdown came along.
So but then lockdown came along, and then I guess all those skills kind of started to come together.
Yeah, and I've missed something else. So it was alongside the work that I was doing with the corporates, I was also doing pro bono. I was working for free, helping victims and survivors of abuse. So there were a lot of victims. I don't know if you remember the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. There were lots of children in children's homes, in foster care, the church, lots of institutions where there was a cover-up, children were abused, sexually abused. So there was a big independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. And I was helping some of the survivors really, because I'd done the therapy training and I understood the media, and I thought, well, this is powerful. This is an opportunity for them to have a voice and to be heard. Yeah. So I would assist, and also helping whistleblowers as well, police whistleblowers, for example, who felt that they had witnessed injustice, corruption, abuse, etc. And they now had suddenly a platform on which to publish those stories. And that's really started to kick off in 2016, I would say.
Right, okay.
YouTube, Facebook, and we started to see more video on these platforms. So that was really important work for me.
But it was almost like it was all building up to what really happened then when lockdown kicked in.
Well, lockdown was different. So, lockdown was a different story, but I was working with someone called Michael Tarrager, who had a story that he wanted to get out there. He used his compensation money from Lambeth Council. He was in foster care and he was horrifically sexually abused. He ended up getting compensation, and he published a book. And that was my very big part of my life alongside the training work that I was doing with the corporate. So I was helping him. And then lockdown came along, and then my focus shifted. My focus shifted because my children were suddenly out of school. I was confused by what was happening because I suddenly saw people being censored from YouTube, whereas it never really happened before.
Yeah.
Obviously, dangerous stuff had been censored. Really, what's the word? Explicit, horrific. What's the word? Really bad stuff. Really bad stuff on YouTube was taken down. But we started to see stuff taken off YouTube that was just a different opinion around what COVID might be. Yeah. So I was like, wait a minute, this has never happened before. And it was a time when we were all locked down, and there were certain things that happened that I wanted to question. I felt I wasn't able to question, and a puzzling time. So I was in Lidl, for example, in Barry, doing my shopping next to an overweight woman coughing. Yeah, this was before masks. Yeah. She was closer to me than you are, yeah? But I couldn't see my mum and dad. in Gloucestershire. I wasn't allowed to go into Gloucestershire, but I was next to this. And she, arguably, the reason I've mentioned she may be overweight is because they were more likely to have COVID. And, if you were vulnerable or overweight, I think you were more at risk.
Yeah. Well, it was the I can't even say the word now. Breathing, let's say that instead.
Yeah.
But it's the breathing. The heavier you were, the more it would affect you in terms of your breathing and ability. And that was a narrative that if you were overweight, you would find it harder to breathe longer term if you got COVID. So
they tied up the swings and they cordoned off the playgrounds, but I was allowed to walk inside a shopping centre, a really busy shopping centre, when my daughter was up and down the escalator, but we couldn't use the playgrounds. They cordoned off the aisles, toy aisles in Wales. So
that's right.
You couldn't buy essential items. An essential item was a toy. Children's counsellors children weren't able to see their counsellors, and they're really horrific situations children were in, vulnerable children. And, the other thing was the lockdown, the second and third lockdown. I think a lot of people would argue that the first lockdown was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But the second and third caused a lot of confusion and anxiety because we were coming in and out for children. They didn't know whether they were coming or going.
Yeah.
And some really awful things happened in terms of my son, we co-parent with his dad. So I didn't want him to wear a mask. His dad did, but society also wanted him to wear a mask. So he would wear a mask every day. And he's a little boy, he just started secondary school, my sweet little boy. And he never saw his friends' faces. He'd make friends. He never saw their face. Some horrific things happened. They were told if they put their mask down during an exam that they'd fail. This really happened.
Wow.
Where I live, which is about 1.5 miles from the school, a child was abandoned at the bus stop because she forgot her mask exemption card. Now, the poor bus driver, I feel for him because he had to follow these rules. There was very strict rules at the time about masks and mask exemption. She's year 7. She was left, she didn't have a mobile phone and the door was locked. Now, my contact at Wales Online was shocked. They wanted to run this story. And she said, we should have run this story, big national media brand. But because the mum didn't want to be identified, because at the time it was so, people were hysterical. You couldn't discuss these things. If you even talked about masks, I don't know, she didn't want the backlash. So the mum wouldn't be identified. So Wales Online didn't run the story, but I did.
Yeah.
But there were lots of things like that. That I saw my focus shifted during lockdown. And then I started to interview people like Professor Robert Endress from Imperial College London, who said the modelling report was wrong. Neil Ferguson's modelling report was wrong, a very senior lecturer, academic. And then more and more came. There was a professor in Scotland I spoke to who was at a protest, and the BBC came along and said, I've just been sent here to smear this. So it was a very strange time. And it was a time when journalism just didn't seem to exist, where we weren't allowed to ask just questions. We weren't allowed to debate things that we were concerned about. We weren't allowed to say, we couldn't even discuss herd immunity, And then these mask mandates came in, and then the vaccine mandates, or the vaccine passports, rather, vaccine mandates for care workers. And it was a strange time, wasn't it? I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
I mean, the biggest thing for me was the ability not to question, the ability not to have an opinion on it. And if you did, that thing of, if I say something now, I'm stepping out here, and that could go badly on me. And you'd share that thing about, running that story. There were people that actually felt at the time that, they were going massively against the grain and probably didn't have the skills or the knowledge or the people around them to take it on themselves. And I think then what you started to find is people were going online, some information was being shared and then rapidly being wrapped up. But eventually, I think through the whole narrative, they began to emerge some key voices. And if you did your research, you could glean on those key voices. And funnily enough, now hindsight's a wonderful thing, right? You look back and a lot of these voices now, the concerns that they had should have been listened to. And I think for me, how do I put it? I don't think we'd lock down in the same way as we did ever again, because I don't think there's that trust there with what was being said. I think that generally across the board, what was being said was not always true. And I think there is this, and I don't think the governments have recovered from that. Even the elections that we just had.
No one's recovered from it.
Everyone's very skeptical. Whatever someone says on television now, no one's really taking that as truth. They'd rather go and do their own research. That's why someone like Elon Musk taking on X and getting rid of all the stuff. X is fast becoming like a massive news network now, where people were willing to go and do their research to form an opinion, whereas before we'd just watch it and go, oh, it's what the ITV or the BBC, or it's what they said, they're right. And I think now we're in a world where we don't all believe it.
Exactly. Viewing figures don't equate to trust. And for example, let's take something like ITV this morning. Do you remember the Holly and Phil hugging through the plastic?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, their viewing figures were 1 million a day. Now they're down to 500,000. That's not much at all. 500,000 live viewers. A lot of new media is getting that. And even if they do get high viewing figures, so the BBC News at 6, usually on a Monday or Tuesday, is the biggest watched live TV news programme of the week. But that doesn't necessarily mean the trust is there. Viewing figures don't equate to trust. And that's something that's very precious to me. And I was able to speak out at the time. I had income coming in from property, not a huge amount, but it meant I could. And I do have to understand, and I do appreciate the journalists who were in a situation where they had to toe the line because they had to put food on the table and they had a mortgage to pay. I know some very high-profile ITV presenters, for example, who were single parents and wanted to say something, but that was their only income. And I was in a privileged position to have some incredibly high-profile celebrities, presenters, journalists, etc., talk to me off the record. And I knew I was absolutely bang on. I was spot on with what I was doing, providing a counter-narrative.
So was the main... So was it, from your point of view, was it primarily around lockdowns, which is what the challenge was? Or was it the whole narrative? Where?
It was, we're locked in our homes and we're not allowed to talk about it. So
yeah, it's crazy.
We're not allowed to question it. We have to wear a mask all the time. It was the lack of freedom and choice debate, like you said. So it was, there were just a few things that happened, and I lost respect for people because I just thought, like, you're not being able to hold a dying relative's hand as they died. The risk was taken away from us. We were treated like children, and the media. Older media, traditional media brands insulted our intelligence a lot of the time. So make the information available to us, let us decide. It is our decision to decide whether we want to go into the hospital or hold my dad's hand as he dies. I may get COVID. That's my choice. Mm. And if I go back, that they were saying, but you could be around a vulnerable person. They took choice away from us. If I wanted to down a couple of litres of vodka and go driving, that's my choice. I'm putting other people at risk, but it's my choice. That's the law in this country. We can make stupid decisions. That impact ourselves and others. We'd always been able to do that, but all of a sudden we weren't. Yeah. And that's aside from the fact that this virus wasn't impacting children. Yet, my goodness, were they impacted and still remain so to this day, in terms of their mental health. And never really, a lot of my son's friends, or rather that age group, I'm aware, they're not going out and socialising as much as I think they would have done if lockdown hadn't happened. They spent a lot of time in their rooms, on their own, playing computer games.
Where was it? Because obviously you talk about your children. Was there a point where you just thought, seeing your children and the way that they were handled and the way they were acting, where you just thus far no more? Was there something that happened with your children where you looked at them and said, I can't do this anymore?
They were fine. My kids were fine. It was having probably done a lot of work with those victims of child sexual abuse and knowing how horrific it was for them at home, and then realising how many children out there were going to be suffering because they weren't being seen by teachers or health visitors or doctors, counsellors. Everything stopped. They even stopped cancer treatment for terminally ill patients.
Yeah.
But the big thing is whether we're ready to go there yet, talk about it, because the COVID inquiry takes place. And I found there's something called news avoidance. You see them talking, the politicians and other experts, and they're admitted huge failings, but no one's... Let's put it this way. I was in the minority. You got about, I'd say, 90% of the population went along with it. They're embarrassed, they're uncomfortable, they want to forget about it. Something like that. It was a trauma for all of us. Really. I know some people say I had a great lockdown. So some people did. But many people really suffered in terms of their business and relationships and not being able to see family and friends. People I know living on their own.
So
they were just on their own for days and days and days on end, doing nothing.
So that sense of injustice of that period of time, when you emerged out of COVID, what did you carry that with you? Because obviously you're teaching people how to edit on a phone, and now you've got this thing of injustice. What did the life look like after that? Like from now?
Difficult for initially, because obviously then the war in Russia, Ukraine happened immediately. They stopped talking about COVID.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit on edge thinking, what's going on here? Because all of a sudden the news, certain media brands had changed the news, the top story changed.
Yeah.
And so through 2022, I was like, let's hold on a minute. Where are we going now? 2023, 2024. I'm really excited about the future and what we can now achieve. And so many people talk about, I just mentioned ITV this morning, the ratings have gone down to 500,000, but they still talk about Philip Schofield, and it still takes the headlines, still captures the news agenda, what him being on Channel 5, and people were talking about that. I don't think people are fully aware of the power and potential of what they have now here. I mean, never before have we had this tool in which we can communicate whatever we like to anyone in the world. There's 8 billion people in the world, 5 billion are on social media.
Yeah.
3,000 or 3 billion are on Facebook, 2 billion on, it's around 2 billion on TikTok and Instagram, 2.5 billion on YouTube. We all have the power to do that. And instead of thinking about what do we want our future to look like for our children? What we can be excited about? First of all, we can expose corruption, abuse, and injustice now, because we can, as long as we do it well.
Yeah.
But we can also start talking about the things we really care about, envisage this new, beautiful future where we're talking about the things that matter to us. We're setting our own, what's trending. What are our conversation? Instead, we still spend a lot of time talking about what those media brands talk about, what their news agenda is, instead of setting our own. And what really depresses me, I'll be completely honest with you, is when I do any kind of BBC bashing or ITV bashing, or just saying they've lost trust or the viewing figures or whatever, I get so many engagements and comments. But when I talk about something really positive, the engagement's less, and I still think people are triggered by fear. They love that, the
Bad
doom and
news,
gloom.
isn't it? Yeah,
and a lot of the alternative media community who I used to stand proudly with, I'm now incredibly ashamed to, I don't respect a lot of them anymore, because they're doing exactly what they used to accuse what they called the mainstream media of, which is sharing fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're scaring people, a lot of the time over-exaggerating things like COVID vaccine deaths.
Yeah.
Wait there, didn't you just say, you just criticised the mainstream media for over-exaggerating COVID deaths and scaring people. Aren't you just doing that?
Yeah.
So that alternative media community, there's a lot of it's very ugly. I think it's very dangerous, especially if you look at what happened with the UK riots. So I'm really about the power and potential of the media. I'm still doing a lot of work with corporates and working with people as well. I'm working with people like a lady I'll call her Victoria. She's on Twitter, on X, and she is campaigning because of the way her daughter was treated in a rape trial. And she's going to protest outside every Crown Court in England. And she's doing something about it. She's an admirable individual. So she's witnessed injustice, and she's not just sitting there moaning, because she realises now, and she's making real impact.
And I think that's the thing. It's like we have this canvas that we can use, and we can use it as a force for good. And there are certain things where it can be, like, for instance, documentary making, the post office one that actually began to expose all the stuff that went on with the post office and the pensions. And
it wasn't a documentary, you see, it was a drama. They did do a documentary and it had no impact. The drama had an impact with that one.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. But the point is, as a point of canvas, there's the media being used to tell a true story that can bring about change. Because had that story not been told and not been dramatized, it would have never been brought to light, and people would still been rotting away in jail or whatever else. So what I'm saying to you is, as media as a force for good, it has that potential. But what we've seen, I would say, over the last 2 or 3 years or 4 years, we've seen it as a force for bad. And it takes people like you and other people that are in that world to go, well, look, there is another way, and we're going to use it to bring real stories, to tell real situations. From our point of view, like for myself, we've got involved with, we're going to make a 3-part drama around the aspect of men being accused of sexual abuse. Because ultimately, a man can be accused of sexual abuse, and if it's true or not, they're guilty immediately. And then the challenge you have with that is that if it's been disproved, if it's gone to court and it's disproved, nothing remains the same. So if it was a false accusation, it's end of, but that person's life is completely destroyed. The statistics of people that get accused of it, men who get accused of that particular crime, 40% of those people commit suicide. That's too high.
Yeah.
So again, you can look at media and say, well, how do we bring balance? Well,
it's happening. That? This is the new thing. Okay, 2024. This is what's exciting.
Yeah.
So you might think, well, I've just got a mobile, I've got a small channel. But if you do a really good quality post or video and you get it in front of the right people and you connect with the right people, it's not just posting all the time. It's about conversations, direct emails, messages, meetings.
Yeah.
You put pressure on the other media organizations to then cover it. They see this is important. So we are seeing massive changes. And I'll give you the example of, say, look how the BBC covered up for Jimmy Savile for so many years, yeah? But then look at, so nowhere near anything like Jimmy Savile, but I'm just saying something like what happened with Hugh Edwards, okay? Much a different situation, but still something where an individual who worked for the BBC had done something wrong. They were immediately transparent. Things have completely changed. They know that if they don't talk about this and are honest and transparent within the organisation about anything that Hugh Edwards might have been investigated for, and they did come out immediately about that, about some colleagues having concerns, because if they didn't, somebody would get it out on X or Facebook or someone like me. So they have to now. They have to.
That's the big shift.
They can't cover these things up. Cover-up culture doesn't work in 2024. We are living in the most exciting times. But what I really want people to understand, and I know we haven't got so long left, is to not squander this opportunity.
We could talk for hours, by the way.
I could talk all day. I feel like I've only just started.
No, that's okay.
I feel we must not squander this incredible opportunity.
Yeah.
This is why I'm here today, is to really encourage and inspire people to understand that you are the journalist now, but do it well, be balanced, be accurate. Don't get overly emotional and start thinking you're not. If you act as if you don't have the power, that comes across, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You have to act as if you have a right to this information to be shared. You have a right to a voice. All voices can be heard, but it's how you do it without getting really angry and overly emotional and going, oh, the lamestream media, you sheep, all of that kind of stuff. The sheeple and the lamestream media. Oh, have you taken the red pill? Just stop all that stupid language. Focus on the stories that matter to you and publish them in a professional way that gets noticed.
Well, exactly. And I think for me that ties up nicely with purpose. I mean, purpose is about leaning into what you're good at, what you're great at, and making an impact. And it's certainly something that what you're doing now is you've taken all those years of experience on one side and then the other side. And now essentially it's not that you're playing sides. You're saying, look, there is another way. I'm bringing another story and I'm going to elevate the good things and we're going to bring change to the way things are reported. And for me, that's what makes it all worthwhile at the end of the day. Me, I've always seen the media as a force for good if we choose it to be, and what you're doing is certainly adding to that. So thank you for your time today and coming on the Purpose People podcast. How will people get hold of you if they want to reach out and connect? I know you've got lots of followers, so it's going to be
I have got lots of followers and some wonderful, kind, brave people, but I've also got some followers that are quite cynical, and I'm really trying to get them to see, like I said, be inspired. Some people, do you know what they're like? They just don't trust anyone who's a politician. They don't trust anyone who's a journalist or anyone who's in a position of authority. So I'm really trying to inspire people. So I do have lots of followers, but I would love people to follow me. Facebook's my big platform now. And another thing I'm working on at the minute, which I haven't got time to talk to you about, is my local news channel, which is doing incredibly well.
Oh, bro.
So, and I'm teaching other people how to do that where they live. So Facebook and Instagram, I'm not using X as much. X isn't as big as Elon Musk makes out it is, but do contact me. I've got direct messages open on X, but mainly I'm using Facebook, YouTube. There's too many, aren't there? Do you like the tiki-toki? I like the tiki-toki.
We started to post our clips
And then they look good.
and getting the message out. We're just seeing a rise now. So we started off and we're seeing them go up week by week. They're sort of like the regular numbers are starting to increase, which is great. So ultimately, we're just about inspiring people for purpose and double down on it, whatever
fantastic.
shape that takes. So
TikTok's great.
That's our message.
So yeah, I've got my website, breesmedia.co.uk. So I'd love people to follow me and get in touch if they're interested in group training or one-to-one, because that's really what I'm focusing on now, yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Purpose People podcast. How you can help us is to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Google and Amazon. That helps us get our message out there to help people go after their dreams, double down on it and be successful in life on their terms.